last few years before you hang up your stethoscope can actually be critical to a doctor's successful retirement. So let's cover today the 5 things we think every doctor should do before you send in your resignation papers. Welcome back to More Money Minutes for Doctors. I'm your host, Katherine Vessenes. I'm the CEO and founder of MD Financial Advisors, and that's where we help doctors plan, prepare, and prosper. Now, planning ahead can help save you stress and money during the years when you have no income. So today I want to talk about 5 things that every doctor should be doing in order to make that retirement not only more successful, but a lot less stressful. All right, here they are. Number 1, pay your big expenses first before you retire. Here's what I mean by that. Your income is going to be a lot higher now, and you have some possibilities for taking some deductions that may not be available to you after you retire. So let's talk first about medical expenses. Do you need new glasses? How about a new CPAP, a hip replacement, cataract surgery, dental implants? Not only are they going to be cheaper now than they will be in a few years, but once again, you might be able to get your medical insurance to pay for it now when that might not be possible later. So get as many of these out of the way as you can now while you're working, and can put some of this off to your really good insurance that you've got going at work. Now, there's some other big expenses that you also might want to consider. New car. Hey, it'd be lovely to have one that lasts 20 years in retirement. How about remodeling your kitchen, putting on the new deck, refinishing the basement, taking the big trips? Once again, now's the time to be able to do that. Even paying for your grandkids' college now might be the time to finance that expense. All right, get these in place now. They're going to reduce your expenses later. Number 2, let compound interest work for you. Now, there's a great example with Warren Buffett. You've probably heard the name Buffett. He's considered one of the foremost investors ever. And he's currently worth a staggering $136.9 billion. Probably going to be more by the time you actually listen to this. What's interesting was he didn't become a billionaire, yes, that is a billionaire, until the age of 56. He actually turns 94 this month, and he's still working. He's my hero. I'm on my kick-ass 100-year-old program, and I plan to be working at 94 too. But what's interesting about this from a compound interest standpoint is over 99% of his wealth was accumulated after the age of 56. So yes, you're not going to need billions, or you probably even have billions to retire, but with compound interest, your savings are growing exponentially the closer you get to retirement. So I'm not saying that you have to do what Warren did, which is continue to work at 94, but I will say that if you want to push your retirement out a year or two, continue to accumulate more, it does allow compound interest to work for you. Plus, you can get more money in those savings account. So I've covered this concept a lot lately, and I'm sure that we have previous podcasts and more about it on our website if you're interested in more information. Suggestion number 3, live on the income that you think you'll have in retirement. This is gigantic. I found most of our doctors have absolutely no idea how much money they need to live on in retirement. And many times we actually run through a retirement budget for them. We take their existing expenses, figure out which of those are going to continue into retirement, which ones are going to be more, and some of them are going to be eliminated so they can have a better idea. I find it's not very helpful for very young doctors, obviously, because things can change. But if you're thinking about retiring in the next few years, you really need to do that. So take a look at what these expenses could be in your ideal future. Now, one of the things I've noticed is our young doctors can't picture themselves as grandparents, and they have no idea how expensive grandchildren can be. Those of you who are older and have grandkids, you know exactly what I mean, that very often your children may be hitting you up for sending them to private schools, taking expensive vacations, maybe even helping the kids join a golf club or get music lessons. And very often that is going to be adding to your expenses when you're in retirement. That's fine, but just something that we need to plan ahead. So one of the things I suggest is, let's just say hypothetically, you think that after taxes, you'll be able to live in retirement on 180,000 a year. Yes, you're still going to be able to travel. Yes, you're going to be able to play golf. Yes, you're going to be able to see the grandkids. And you're thinking 180,000 a year will be able to do it. So let's do this. A couple years before retirement, let's just set up a special account that you pay all your expenses out. Put in 15,000 a month. That comes to 180,000 annually, and see if you can live on that. Give it a try. Is it easy? Do you have money left over? Yay. Or are you getting strapped every month and you have to keep dipping into savings? That is going to be very, very telling to you to let you know, is that $180,000 a year a realistic number, or do we have to make other changes? Now is the time to find out, not later when you're drafting too much money out of your savings account. All right, number 4, stress test your portfolio. Now, I love doctors because so often you just think God's in his heaven and is all right with the world. They think nothing bad is ever going to happen to them. Or as I like to think of it, nothing hides sin like at high income. I've noticed that particularly when we have do-it-yourself doctors, obviously we don't have many of those at our practice because they need our help. But when you have a do-it-yourself doctor, I notice that they frequently don't take the calamities into consideration when they're doing their projections. They don't take, say, higher taxes or extended inflation. And these are some of the things that you need to put in when you stress test a portfolio. But there's other ways to stress test a portfolio. And I found that most online calculators don't even think about this. And they can kind of give doctors a false sense of security if they're relying on them to be doing their projections in the future. So I wanted today to give you a case study, and let's show you how important it is to do some stress testing on your own portfolio. All right, so hypothetically, we have Jane is a 62-year-old cardiologist. Her husband is already retired. She is burnt out at work. I find a lot of our doctors are burnt out. They're just exhausted. And it's actually not the patients that are exhausting them, but that's a topic for another conversation. So Jane would love to quit her job today if she could, open a yoga studio and get in touch with the zen of life. So here's what's happened when we ran some numbers for her to see if this was going to work. Her goal was to live on $150,000 a year after taxes. And then, of course, this number will need to go up every year for inflation. I put together a little chart here to just show you the impacts of certain kinds of stress testing. Once again, we've got Jane, who's 60 years old. We used an inflation rate of 3.7%, only because this is the rate that has been historical over close to the last 100 years. Obviously, if the inflation was higher, these numbers would not look so rosy. Once again, we're looking at her after-tax income of $150,000. And our software tells us that 99 times out of 100, even with bad markets, Jane's going to get to age 95 and she's going to have some money left over. Or in other words, to think about is this, will she run out of money? Statistically, only 1% of the time. Now, this is not a guarantee. As I tell all clients, we're just looking at the probabilities. All right, let's do the first stress test. We still have Jane retiring at 60. Remember, she wants to hang it up this year. What if we throw in 10 years of travel expenses? She and her husband wanted to do some worldwide traveling, also some in the States. And then we also threw in some additional medical expenses. One of the things many doctors haven't planned on is the studies show that in retirement, there's a lot of additional medical expenses that clients have that is not covered by your insurance. So we put that in for the entire length of their retirement. We put in 10 years of travel. Yeah, if they didn't travel, if they didn't use the medical expenses, great. They buy a new car, do something else with it. Same after tax, income still going up with inflation. Note, though, that the probability of success does drop down to 97%, meaning 3% of the time under this new scenario, this new stress test, they will be running out of money. That doesn't bother me a lot, and a lot of that's up to a client. How do they feel? But let's take something that statistically is much more likely to happen. If we're retiring at 60, there's still a possibility, a high statistical probability, that either Jane or her husband is going to have what we call a long-term care event. In our analysis, we looked at spending an additional $80,000 a year for 5 years and some sort of nursing home facility or some additional long-term care expenses. Even if, and the not surviving, but the spouse that's remaining at home is still needing to live on about $150,000 a year. Now, this really starts to hurt the probability of success. 91%, meaning 9% of the time, Jane and her husband will be running out of money in retirement. This starts to concern me personally. A lot of clients can live with this. I personally could not, but it's really up to the clients, just so that they go into this well aware of what their situation is. Now, what if Jane, though, really wants to live on more money? This is why I said it's so good for you to see how much money you really need to live on in retirement. What if we increase her living expenses just $25,000 a year? That's a little more than $2,000 a month, not tons of money, as we all well know. Look what happens then. Now her probability of success is only 73%, or a whopping 27% of the time Jane and her husband will be running out of money. This is not a case where I would recommend that they increase their living expenses, or that they retire with these kind of probabilities. I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's 73%. Well, hello, it's almost more than 1 in 4 times running out of money, which does not sound like a happy experience. And if you've listened to some of my other podcasts, you know that it did happen to my medical family when my mother was running out of money, when my stepdad, a very prominent bariatric doctor, died suddenly, leaving her without any money. So it's a painful situation that I really hope we try to help make sure all of our clients can avoid. I think the moral of my story here is don't trust the online calculators, and don't trust your own calculations. There's a lot of nuances that go into this to make sure that you are going to be in very, very good shape. All right. Last thing, number 5, get a second opinion on your finances. You know, if you had some horrible illness, likely you'd be getting a second opinion on that. I think that what's so important about this is getting a second opinion on what we call a distribution strategy. So when you're accumulating wealth, in fact, in my experience, a vast majority of financial advisors just work on accumulating wealth. That's fantastic. And we have a whole set of protocols that we have for accumulating wealth. But to me, much more important than accumulating wealth is how do we distribute it in a tax-efficient manner in retirement? Not enough financial advisors, and certainly I have never, ever had a doctor come to me and tell me that they had done some calculations on this. It's crucially important and something very absolutely life-saving for you that I encourage you to do before you retire. Now, in the industry, we call these distribution strategies. How do you pull the money out of the right bucket at the right time to increase your after-tax income? Now, this is a hard problem for me to solve when I have a doctor who comes to me who's 60 and they want to retire at 62. They typically do not have enough money in the tax-free buckets to make this work very, very well. But it's a good thing to know up front. It's a much easier problem for me to solve with a 35 or a 45-year-old doctor, because we have many years then that we can be doing this strategy in advance. Or in other words, our accumulation strategy always needs to take into consideration our distribution strategy in retirement. Now, we have some very sophisticated software, and it can show us some of the pros and cons of different accumulation strategies and how it impacts the distribution strategies later. I recommend this for every single client, but I've actually seen doctors who didn't plan ahead spend $1 million or even more in retirement on unnecessary taxes because they didn't take this vital step. So make sure that you get a second opinion on your distribution strategy. So in conclusion, my goal, my mission for you is to have financial independence. I want you to be able to retire safely and never have a minute's worry about running out of money. So please follow us on social media. I hope you found this helpful. If you did, I would be honored if you'd forward it on to your colleagues, because it might help save them. You can certainly send us any questions or topics for future issues. And if you want a second opinion on your financial health, you can do that by emailing us at info@mdfinancialadvisors.com. So remember, take care of yourself, plan, protect, and prosper.